For more than 20 years, Jeffrey Epstein's crimes were an open secret. But this isn't just the story of one man. It's the story of the system that allowed him to thrive, an architecture of impunity. And today, we're going to deconstruct it, piece by piece. So you have to ask yourself, how does this happen? How does a known criminal enterprise run by a registered sex offender operate for decades among the most powerful people on the planet? And how do the very systems that are supposed to protect us just completely fail? To get to the bottom of that, we have to peel back the layers of defense he built around himself. And that first layer, well, it's the most visible one, the mask of legitimacy. To really get how Epstein got away with it for so long, you have to understand the public face he created. It was meticulous, a carefully constructed facade designed to do one thing: open every door and build a powerful shield of respectability.
And this was his masterpiece of deception. On the one hand, he was the philanthropist, the patron of science, a brilliant connector of great minds. That's what the world saw. But behind that mask was the predator, the registered sex offender with dozens and dozens of victims. You see, the philanthropy, that wasn't about charity. It was camouflage, a strategic investment in credibility, designed to make the awful truth seem completely impossible.
But an image like that needs fuel, a lot of it. So where did all that money come from? Well, that's the thing. The source was always a mystery. He told people he managed the fortunes of billionaires, but the only major client ever confirmed was one man, Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands. And that relationship, it was the key to everything. It gave Epstein access to not just unimaginable wealth, but to the credibility that came with it. And when we say unimaginable wealth, we mean it. Take a look at this number. $77 million. That's the approximate value of the Manhattan mansion that Leslie Wexner just transferred to Epstein. This wasn't a simple business transaction. This was the financial bedrock of the entire operation. But Epstein was smart. He knew money alone wasn't going to cut it. It could buy you access, sure, but true legitimacy, the kind that makes you untouchable, that comes from the world's most elite institutions. So he strategically invested in the credibility of academia. $850,000. That's what he donated to the MIT Media Lab. And get this, it was after he was already a convicted sex offender. We know from internal emails that the lab's director knew Epstein was a disqualified donor. So what did they do? They deliberately concealed where the money was coming from. And MIT was not an isolated case. Look at this, $6.5 million. That was his donation to Harvard. And what did that buy him? It bought him at least 40 visits to the campus after he was a registered sex offender. By plastering his name alongside these pillars of academia, he was essentially laundering his reputation right out in the open. Okay, so let's recap. He's got the mysterious fortune. He's got the seal of approval from elite institutions. The next layer in this architecture of impunity was the web of power, the network of influential people who gave him access, protection, and maybe most importantly, an aura of being completely untouchable. You want to know who was in that web? Just look at the flight logs from his private jet. The names, revealed in court documents, they read like a guest list to the Davos of power. Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz. These names weren't just passengers on a plane. They were human shields. They were social armor. Think about it. When you fly with presidents and princes, who's ever going to dare question you?
And for those rare moments when he did face legal trouble, he assembled a team whose influence went way beyond the courtroom. I mean, look at this roster. A famed Harvard law professor, the former independent counsel who investigated President Clinton, a former special envoy for President George W. Bush, a celebrity defense attorney. This wasn't a legal defense team. This was a show of force, a power play.
And what did that power play get him? This, the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. It's been called one of the most bizarre and favorable plea deals in American history, a secret deal that made all federal charges simply vanish. And it didn't just protect Epstein, it granted blanket immunity to all of his co-conspirators. And the worst part? The terms were deliberately hidden from the victims. So why on earth would the U.S. government agree to a deal like that? Well, the U.S. attorney who signed off on it, a man named Alexander Acosta, he later gave this chilling explanation. When he was pressed for an answer, he said, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." It's a statement that, to this day, has never been officially explained. It just hangs there, leaving this huge, dark question mark at the very heart of the case. And that quote, it leads us to the final, deepest, and most disturbing layer of this whole architecture, the systemic failure. The very institutions that are supposed to provide oversight and deliver justice, law enforcement, the courts, even the financial system, they didn't just bend, they broke.
Just look at this timeline of the first major investigation. It shows a complete, systematic breakdown of justice. In 2005, you have local police in Palm Beach doing their job. They identify over 40 potential victims. But then, at every single step after that, the case gets weaker. The state attorney brings just one minor charge. Then, federal prosecutors under Acosta sign that secret deal. And the result? Epstein serves a mere 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges. A massive federal case, dismantled piece by piece.
And these failures, they followed him right to the very end. At the federal prison where Epstein ultimately died, a Justice Department investigation found just a catastrophic chain of negligence. Guards were falsifying records, admitting they failed to check his cell. He was taken off suicide watch just 12 days before his death. The surveillance cameras right outside his cell mysteriously malfunctioned. And on top of all that, the facility was severely understaffed. It was a perfect storm of failure that has fueled so many questions ever since. But it wasn't just the justice system. The watchdogs in the financial world, they were asleep at the wheel too. The world's biggest banks, the ones that are legally required to report suspicious activity, they didn't just look the other way. They actively enabled his operations for years, even after he was a convicted felon. $290 million. That's not a fine. That's the amount J.P. Morgan Chase paid to settle a lawsuit with Epstein's victims. They kept him as a client for 5 years after his 2008 conviction. They processed millions upon millions of dollars in transactions that lawsuits later showed had all the red flags of human trafficking. And when J.P. Morgan finally did cut ties, Deutsche Bank was right there to pick him up as a client. They were eventually hit with this penalty, $150 million, by New York regulators for the exact same thing. Failing to monitor his accounts. This wasn't some clerical error. This was a systemic, conscious failure at the very highest levels of global finance. So after all of this, years of reporting, investigations, trials, you'd think we'd have all the answers. But we don't. The truth is, the story is far from over. Because what's left behind is a series of profound and deeply disturbing unanswered questions. First and foremost, the money. Where did it actually come from? Despite all the scrutiny, a full, transparent accounting of his wealth has never been made public. The business he claimed to be in just doesn't add up to that kind of fortune. The real source of his immense wealth remains an unsolved mystery. And then there's Alexander Acosta's claim, that chilling statement, that he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence. That has never been officially explained or walked back. Was there another, even deeper layer of protection that we still know nothing about? And finally, who else was involved? We know the 2008 deal gave immunity to unnamed co-conspirators. We know that mountains of evidence were seized from his properties. And yet, years later, Ghislaine Maxwell is the only other major figure to face prosecution. Who else was on those tapes? Who else was part of this network? And why have they never been held accountable? And that brings us to the final and most important question of all. Not about the past, but about the future. The Epstein case itself might be closed, but the systems that enabled him, they still exist. The dynamics of money, power, and influence that created his shield of impunity, they are all still very much in play. So the real question isn't just about what happened back then. It's about us, now. Will we allow another architecture of impunity to be built?